Welcome back to Quarantine Catch Up. I am your host, Timmy Rinaldi, and as always, I am joined by the incomparable Chris Famularo. We are finally back, and we're happy to be back with a new special guest. I want to thank everybody for being patient with us, and we have a lot of new things coming out. Please like and subscribe because that's how we know what you guys want and that you guys are enjoying the content. But let's introduce our guest for this week. He's not just a fan, he's a fanatic of Seton Hall Sports. He has his own podcast called The Igloo with Timmy Ice, and he's just a great guy. Please welcome to the show, Tim Best. How you doing, bud?
Tommy, Chris, it's an honor to be on your show. I've been watching and seeing, a lot of the people that I knew from Seton Hall on your show, and it's like, I got to get in on this somehow. So now that I'm here, glad to be here, and I'm ready to get rolling, baby.
We're very glad that you're here. We've been trying to make this happen for a while. As Tommy said, sorry it took us so long, but I'm glad that we're finally here.
Hey, man, it's all about the process, man.
Exactly. So thank you for your patience. You were one of the first people to reach out, and I really do appreciate that. I love supporting each other and all that good stuff. But what I do want to know is, how have you been during quarantine, and what have you been watching and listening to during quarantine?
Well, I mean, I've kind of been hit hard with everything being shut down. As you guys know, I work mainly in sports, so I work for a number of different teams. Thankfully, one of the teams I work for, their season was already over. I think their postseason ended about a week and a half before, everything started getting crazy with, I think the one hallmark event was when Rudy Gobert tested positive for the Utah Jazz, and that started this complete downward spiral with the NBA canceling and all these other leagues shutting down too. And the team I was working for was a Division III junior college team, and their season had wrapped up a week and a half before that. They had just had their postseason, and they lost in the finals of their region. And with the other teams I work for, Utica City FC, I know we'll touch on them a little bit later. They were about 2 weeks left in the regular season when everything was shut down. And then my summer collegiate baseball team, the Utica Blue Sox, who I've been working for literally since I was a senior in high school, they didn't even have a season this summer. They were trying to make things work. We were kind of like sitting on pins and needles waiting for something to happen, but it was around mid-May when we found out that there wasn't going to be a season, which sucked for, obviously the teams who have to run a franchise and make money and whatnot. So it was unfortunate, but it was for the best, and it didn't help because with summer collegiate baseball, you're bringing in guys from all over the country. So you really don't know what they're going to bring in. So overall, it was just the best thing to do. And I totally understood that. As much as it sucked, I had to understand and, be compassionate of the circumstance of this whole situation. What have I been doing? That's a good question. I think more recently, with sports coming back, I've been watching more of those. I think I watched more NBA basketball than I had in a while, which was weird. Because even with the Knicks, I'm a Knicks fan.
Mm-hmm.
And a family friend of mine, he actually, fun fact, he does he's the guy who fires the t-shirt cannon at the Garden.
Nice.
So even with the Knicks not being in the bubble, I still watched quite a bit. I watched a lot of playoff hockey. Fun fact, where I'm from, Utica, New York, we got an AHL team, the Comets. And the people who own the Comets are the same people who own Utica City FC. So, I'm hopefully, getting it in with them and everything. And then on top of that, of course, I watch a lot of baseball. And then honestly, one thing I have been doing, I have been listening to and watching a lot, like in terms of like TV shows and podcasts and all that. One thing I have been doing, there's this website called 8-Bit that emulates old school video games, and one game that I got really into, and I did a full season mode of it with all 28 teams in the league at the time. There were still 4 that weren't even born yet when this came out in 1991. Tecmo Super Bowl. Nice. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but
of course.
It's a Hallmark game. Like Bo Jackson, I think part of his persona was created by that game because they made him like head and shoulders above literally every other running back and every other player in the game. So I literally did an entire season mode of that over the course of like a month or two. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, but other than that, now that college hoops is back, like I'm just binging that, and and during this whole quarantine, I've been reaching out to people, getting a lot of good content from my podcast, interviewing, people across a number of different avenues. Like I got to interview the executive associate commissioner of the Big East, Stu Jackson, who actually gave me some really good insight. Because for those of you that remember, the Big East was the last conference to cancel their tournament because everyone else had, and the Big East played the first half of a quarterfinal game that Thursday afternoon, March 12th. They got through the first half of St. John's Creighton before they announced that they were canceling the remainder of the tournament. So literally the last college basketball we saw until, last week was that game, St. John's Creighton, and Stu Jackson gave me some really good perspective and like an inside look as to what went into finally canceling the Big East tournament, how difficult of a decision that was. And even during the summer, like TBT, I did quite a few interviews with that. Especially, it was great to see Marquette's alumni team won the whole thing. So that's Marquette's first championship, if you will, since 1977. And probably their first real taste of glory since Dwayne Wade.
Yeah. You have a lot to unpack there. And it's really nice to hear that you're taking this downtime for everybody and still trying to make the most of it by networking and still trying to get your foot in the door with other people, still growing your own brand, which is really important. And I'm glad to hear that sports has really been a solace for you, and I'm sure for a lot of us as well. Something that you mentioned is the Pirates are also back, and we've had two very, I would say, pretty good outings for the Pirates. What's been promising to you? What are your thoughts on the team so far? And how crushing was that first Louisville loss? Because it was a close game.
It's really funny. I think in a half an hour before tip-off, I'm in a group chat with some people, and we were making score predictions. And I'm like, my heart wants Seton Hall, but my head's picking Louisville. And my final score pick was 73-72, and it ended up being 71-70.
So close.
Like, I mean, to me, that's a win. Like, I think I did a pretty good job of picking that. It was a crushing loss, but when I was playing basketball growing up, I was drilled. What was drilled into my head was free throws win and lose games, and I think partially, Takal Molson might have been iced at the end on that last free throw because he had calmly sank the first two. Mm-hmm. But overall, what really impressed me to see Shavar Reynolds grow has been tremendous, because I remember my senior year was when he came in as a freshman and as a walk-on. Mm-hmm. And to see him go from a guy that was not on scholarship, he got a scholarship, and the correct wording of that is not only did he get it, he earned it. We saw his role increase year after year, and it's just been tremendous because the guy has a tremendous work ethic that shows on the court. He works his butt off, and he's a tremendous player. I mean, he's tremendous defensively. He knows how to run an offense. He's smart with his shot selection. He's smart with the ball. He's what you want. Now that he's a senior, he's what you want as a senior leader on this team, along with guys like Mamu and Miles Kale. I've been impressed with Takal Molson. It might not show on the stat sheet, but he's doing all the little things, disrupting in the passing lanes, not giving up easy looks. Him drawing the foul with 0.7 seconds left, that put him in a position to tie the game. And that started with a pump fake, something we rarely see. Like, and I think the big thing is with the first half of the Iona game, trust me, I think a lot of us were really irritated with how they played in the first half. But in the second half, that was the Seton Hall I think all of us are looking to see it. They're not going to dominate a team in the second half like they did, in Big East play. You might get Georgetown, who, by the way, I don't know if you saw, they lost to Navy last night.
Yeah,
so
it's crazy.
Georgetown is not going to be a very good team. We don't know where we're going to get with DePaul yet. They're traditionally bad. They open up Big East play with them next Friday. So I'm intrigued to see what DePaul's going to do. They have a first-team guy in Charlie Moore that I really like a lot. But I think with Seton Hall, it's going to be a challenge still because they have, a long stretch where they're playing a game every other day, and they're going to have to do it all without Bryce Aiken, who is another senior leader at point guard. He twisted his ankle at Louisville, and it's just like, it sucks because this is a really good, talented player, but he's just plagued by the injury bug. It sucks. But when he does come back, I really am optimistic that we're going to see what Harvard got out of him, especially during his freshman year where he was Ivy League Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, and I think the one thing this team has is a lot of really good depth of almost every position. It is very good. And I think once Bryce Aiken comes back, I think we'll have another scorer. We're seeing Mamu really step up with all of that.
I didn't even touch on Jared Rhoden. Jared Rhoden's a stud. Kevin Willard has been hyping him up since literally the summer of before the 2019-20 season. He was saying, behind Miles Powell, he was probably their second best player. Now he might be the guy on this team. And when all is said and done, instead of Mamu, depending on what happens and if teams focus on him more, we might see Jared Rhoden being a first team caliber guy. If not that, maybe second team. Again, it all depends on, how much success Seton Hall sees in Big East play, which I think they will see quite a bit of that. I got him in the 3 to 5 range. Villanova and Creighton are concrete 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
I think having them at 5 was a little bit low in the preseason poll, but I the way I see it, I think 3 or 4 is really what they should be gunning for and what should solidly get them into the tournament yet again, and that's just the standard that Kevin Willard set, which has been tremendous.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're probably going to see, at least I think, with Mamu having a higher role, I think we might see a little bit of Seton Hall play going back to when Angel Delgado and Desi Rodriguez were on the team. You're going to see Sandro just as much as Angel did. When he goes in, low, he's going to draw a lot of attention, and you're going to have to kick it out most of the time. I mean, we've been seeing already in the 2 games, Seton Hall is just sitting on the outside. I think they're kind of still in that habit from when Miles Powell was on the team, kind of relying on the 3-point shot. But you have Rhoden, who frankly is like a midway scorer. He's very good. He can be very good inside the paint. He has a 3-point shot. So I think if they rely both on Miles Cale and Jared Rhoden to be a kick-out option and be a second or third option from Sandro being the primary scorer, you can really alternate your scoring chances versus when we loved watching Miles Powell play, but you knew he was their go-to guy. No matter what the situation was, they were always going to try and find him, except for the one game against Butler where they found Sandro underneath the bucket.
Yeah, and I think another two-way guy that I really like who can score on the outside, his shot looks really good, but, someone said that he literally swishes nothing but net or he misses really badly. Tyrese Samuel. This is a guy
I like him a lot too.
He's got a lot of talent. I mean, 6'10", who can get to the rim, and he's got that 3-point shot. It's just a matter of just finding that dead aim because, it's one thing to have it nothing but net, but like to have, one shot be like that and then the next one just being, off to the side of the backboard, not even hitting rim, that's a kink you got to work on in practice, through repetition. I think he'll find a way to tweak that. I know, his assistant coaches are going to help him out with that. I know Grant Billmeyer, a 7-foot assistant coach, which is, completely unheard of. I mean, but to be fair, you got Patrick Ewing, who's the head coach at Georgetown, same height. But I know that that coaching staff, they know how to work with their guys to, make sure they're doing all the little things right, working on those little mechanical things. And I think they can easily make that adjustment with Tyrese. But they're not going to have much time to do it over this next stretch because they play tonight at Rhode Island, and then they play Friday against Oregon, and then Sunday night at Penn State, and then Tuesday night back at the Rock against Wagner. So they're not going to have a lot of time to practice, and they're going to see a lot of game action. So again, I'm intrigued to see how much that depth, you talk about, Tommy, like that's going to be important in games like these because you're going to have a lot of tired legs out there, and you're going to have to rely on those fresh legs to kind of carry you through those games. And that could be an X factor and a deciding factor between winning and losing games like that, especially when you face a ranked team like Oregon and maybe even, a toss-up game like we're going to see tonight at Rhode Island, then later on in the week at Penn State.
Yeah. It is a tough schedule coming up, but I really like what you said about the coaching staff and the development of the players, because since Willard has come in, we do have a lot of talented kids on the team, but we've really seen their development as they get older each year. And it's been really nice to see Jared Rhoden really step into his own, to see Mamu step into his own, to see Shavar, like you said earlier, really come from a walk-on to a leader of this team and someone that I see as very dependable for this team. He's kind of seen as what would have been a backup to Bryce Aiken, but he shows that he could still facilitate the ball. He's very good defensively. And it's something that's a lot of fun to see. And something that was a lot of fun to see in our time at Seton Hall was you as a fan of Seton Hall, Bluebeard Army, making signs, having relationships with a bunch of different people within athletics to make sure you were right at the front, supporting the team night in and night out. What was it like being part of Bluebeard Army?
Growing up, I was always, fascinated with, student sections. The student section at Syracuse University, which is an hour from where I live, like I had season tickets growing up. So I was going to games. I was 7 years old when I saw Carmelo Anthony win the national championship. For that, Carmelo Anthony will forever be my hero.
Yeah.
But their student section is called Otto's Army. And I paid attention to all the little traditions they had, during the starting lineups for the visiting team, the first player, they'll go, who's he? And then it goes on to, so what, who cares? Big deal. And then big,
yeah,
I'm gonna keep it clean. And then, I paid attention to and during Syracuse's lineups, they would do based on every player, they do these little motions with their hands, for example, Rakeem Christmas, they would throw up the Xmas, which I thought was just genius.
Yeah.
So I paid attention to that stuff. I'm like, you know what? Syracuse was my dream school, crazy enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to do broadcast journalism somehow, some way. And I got waitlisted at Newhouse. So I had to look at other options. And Seton Hall was something I really wasn't thinking about. And then all of a sudden, I see Seton Hall at a college fair in Utica. And I get talking to them and like, this could be something. And I message a friend of mine, his name's Pat Hines, who is doing grad school now at Iowa State.
Mm-hmm.
He's 2 years older than me, went to the same high school as me. And I messaged him about Seton Hall, and he's like, yeah, it's a really good place. And we actually have a radio station and everything that I think you might like. You should come for a visit sometime soon. So I ended up going in January of my senior year of high school. I liked it there. And then when I went for Accepted Students Day in April, when I left there, I'm like, okay, I'm coming here. And the very next day, I ended up filming. I don't know if you guys know about this, an iconic video of sorts where I announced the decision video. Yeah. Where I announced my college decision, a la, what you see on National Signing Day with a lot of college football, basketball prospects, where they have the hats lined up on the table and they have this press conference, if you will, and announce where they're going to school. And in a tribute of ways to LeBron James, I end up saying, I'm going to take my talents to South Orange. And that kind of just lived on. And I didn't realize how big of a deal it was until I got to Pirate Adventure for orientation. And people are like, oh my God, that's the kid from the decision video. I'm like, oh my God. It was a whirlwind, man. I'm like, I have expectations to live up to now. Yeah. And I think as time went on, the whole sign making thing started literally because what happened that baseball season was when, I don't know if you remember Hunter Pence signs, mm-hmm. when they would just make just stupid stuff about Hunter Pence, he doesn't recycle and things like that. I'm like, I'm going to do that because it's stuff that everyone can laugh at. And I'm like, I'm going to take this to the basketball court. And the first game we did that was the Garden State Hardwood Classic, the first annual. And it was just little stuff. And it caught on. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to be around for the rest of the fall semester. And there's a few games over winter break. So when we come back, I'm going to keep at this. And I'm really glad I did. Freshman year, I did not have my best stuff. Let's put it that way. But as time went on, like I credit the people that I started going to games with, the close friends that I, created the Sign Mafia with, and we really bounced off of each other, and we ended up creating, this. I don't want to say a cult, but it became such a fabric of what Seton Hall basketball came to be, and just the home court advantage it became. Like, because in Big East play my freshman year, we tailed off because people started giving up on the team. I still went to the games. I still remember a game after we had lost 6 in a row. There were like less than 150 students there. It was ugly. And the following year, we make we go on a great run. We beat Wichita State at home, and then Big East play, we tear it up. Instead of collapsing with the same halfway record in conference play at 5-4, we end up winning 7 of 9 instead of losing 8 of 9 like we did the year before. And then, of course, man, the Big East tournament. I was there for all 3 games, and I'm a big superstitious guy. And I'll tell you, I wore the same exact thing every time I went. The only thing I changed was the color bandana I wore based on, what color jersey we wore. So we wore white the quarterfinal. I wore white. The other 2 games, we wore blue because we were the visitors as the lower seed. And like, I wore the same outfit. I didn't even change boxers and socks, man. Like,
superstitious to the end, right?
Yeah. I'm not superstitious, but I am a little stitious.
Love it.
Michael Scott would say. But just it's just crazy going back and thinking about so many of the great moments I had, and just, 'cause I didn't miss a single home game from winter break my sophomore year until I graduated. So 38 straight games. I didn't miss a single one.
Pure dedication.
Yeah. And I saw them on the road quite a few times, at the Garden when we played St. John's, a couple of neutral site games there too for the Under Armour reunion. Rutgers senior year was god awful, and I still get PTSD from it. And then I even went, I decided to forego Thanksgiving senior year to be at the Barclays Center to watch us play Rhode Island, another gut-wrenching, heartbreaking game. But in the end, though, I mean, I can still sit here and, when the time comes, I'll get to tell my kids and my grandkids, I'm I went to March Madness twice. Junior year, that's a trip I'll never forget, driving overnight with 4 of my friends from campus to South Carolina, which was just insane. And then senior year, getting the GoFundMe page, which was unbelievable, to fly out to Wichita. And I think that was the perfect way to end it, to finally get a tournament win. It was just so relieving, and to be 2 rows behind the bench to witness it, it was just literally right out of a movie. And it was the same thing when we played Kansas a couple nights later. Even though we lost, I still feel at peace with everything, because Angel had the game of his life that night. Even though we lost, 24 points and 23 rebounds is not easy, especially against a team like Kansas. Exactly. It was a road game. It was a road game that they played, and he still had a monster game against, Udoka Azubuike, who, was drafted in the first round of the draft just a couple weeks ago. And then, Kadeen had a monster game. And, some of the great moments, I mean, even with the sign making, having a funny rapport with opposing players, it's one thing to have, friendships with the guys on your squad, which I did. I'm still friends with Mike Enzi to this day. But I still go back to the Tyler Lewis story, my sophomore year. It's going to be 5 years this February, which is going to be insane. I know I'm going to bring it up to him soon. Tyler Lewis was a kid from Butler, 5 foot, about my height, 5'11", who has a very boyish appearance, so I made a sign saying he orders off the kids menu, and he at halftime. At halftime, if you know the setup, Butler's bench is on the student section side, so they're warming up on the basket facing the student section. So we're holding up the sign, and he comes up to us like, "Hey, that's really funny. Can I have it?" I'm just sitting here like, wait, you what? He's like, yeah, I want to take it home. I'm like, you know what? Since you asked so nicely, yeah, we'll make it happen. Like, we had to scramble to like find someone in athletics who could like run the sign to the locker room.
Mm-hmm.
And when I finally got back to my dorm room after the game, I checked on Twitter, and all of a sudden I see this picture of Tyler Lewis holding my sign on the plane. I'm like,
that's awesome.
I made it, man. And the funny thing is, like, I still talk to Tyler every now and then. And when I interviewed him last year, I asked him, like, do you still have it? He's like, yeah, my parents have it at home in North Carolina.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's
so
awesome.
it's one of, like, honestly, the biggest thing for me and the lasting impact that I want to be remembered for was that I had a great rapport, not just among the Seton Hall fan base, but it was really throughout. Like, the only people that had beef with me were from Rutgers, and that's understandably so.
Yeah, that's
but
fine.
To have a lot of widespread respect throughout the league, like even with a guy like JP McCura, who I got under his case quite a bit, but when he burned us senior year, I reached out to him like, you know what, man, you shut me up, and all I had, I just got to, throw my hands up in the air and say, you know what, you got my respect, and best of luck the rest of the year. And hopefully we'll get to see you in the Garden. Unfortunately we didn't, but it would have been really great if I got to rib at him one more time. But yeah, that's what I want to be remembered for most. The fact that number one, having that rapport with the other teams, because after all, it's sports is something that's not supposed to be life or death, or to be war, really.
It's entertainment at its base.
Yeah, exactly. It's a game. It's its only a game. Why you have to be mad? And then of course I think just to inject energy into the student section and establish a culture, because Seton Hall basketball, like, that was their goal throughout this whole time, because up until my sophomore year when they made the tournament, won the Big East championship, they hadn't made the tournament since 2006. So their goal, get back to the tournament and then establish that standard and move forward with it. And that's what they've done, even though, Shaheen Holloway, Fred Hill, they've all stepped away. Shah's doing a great job at St. Peter's, by the way. I had him on my show not too long ago, and he even told me, and it still resonates with me that he told me, you just had as much of a role in helping resurrect Seton Hall basketball as the players and coaches and administration. So, and he told me that in Wichita. He told me that again when we talked last time, and it still means so much, and it just, it's a whirlwind to think that, after all this time and even almost 3 years removed now, to have that kind of impact, it still has a special place in my heart. Seton Hall is always going to be home for me, even though I'm 4 hours away from it now.
Yeah, and it's really nice to hear that you've had all those experiences, and they were very positive. You've really developed relationships with all these people. Someone that really helped also boost Seton Hall to what it is today is Miles Powell, and he actually goes to your favorite team. What do you think about that signing? What do you think about Obi Toppin being drafted? I know the Knicks have been very rough these past few years, but seeing these two standout players going to the team, there is a good amount of hope for their future.
There really is. When I was watching the draft, with the Knicks having the 8th pick, I was like, man, they're not going to get that guy that they want. And when all these bizarre picks were being made, Patrick Williams at 4 to Chicago, that's a head scratcher. Then the next pick, Isaac Okoro to Cleveland, I'm just like, and then you just wait. 6, Obi's still on the board. 7, he didn't get picked. Oh my God, we're going to get Obi Toppin. And he falls right into New York's lap, and just like, oh man, like it just felt so relieving to finally get a guy that we want. Like, I think we obviously last year, as the Knicks should have gotten the number 1 pick. If there's no such thing as a lottery, the Knicks get the number 1 pick and they get Zion Williamson. But when I think about it now, I'm really content that they ended up getting R.J. Barrett instead. I think the best player in that class was John Morant, but I think for the system that the Knicks are running and just what they're trying to do, RJ Barrett is going to be a big piece for this team moving forward. I just hope that they do everything they can to keep him there. But getting Obi Toppin was huge. And then I'm still really pissed that I know Miles still signed with the Knicks. I'm very happy about that. But for Miles to go undrafted, I don't know. That just didn't sit well with me. And, like looking at some of the guys that ended up getting drafted, like Yam Madar, who's probably not going to come over here for a long time. Sam Merrill from Utah State, Justinian Jessup, who was only second team. How are these guys getting picked over Miles Powell, who has all the tools that you would want out of an NBA guard? I mean, granted, he was an undersized shooting guard at Seton Hall, but he developed point guard qualities during his senior year.
Mm-hmm.
He was distributing the ball a lot more. He was running more of the offense, especially when Quincy was out of the game. Miles was the point guard, and Shavar would usually be the two in most situations. But, like I was always, thinking after the draft ended, I'm like, man, if Miles Powell ended up on the Knicks, I'd cry. I didn't cry, but Miles ending up to the Knicks, like you were just like, no, there's no way that actually happened, but it did. And it's just like, oh my God, like now I have even more of a reason to root for the Knicks. Like, I mean, they're my team, but now that they have someone that I know, and the really funny thing is, I actually met him and Bryce Aiken when they visited Seton Hall together when they were in high school 5 years ago.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, and the really funny story about that. I was out with them and a few of the guys from the basketball team, and we went to, I think, a house that was, I'm pretty sure a few of the soccer players that were there at the time were living there.
Mm-hmm.
So we go to this party, and basically I have to play like this. I have to be like a supervisor, if you will, because if you don't know, I don't drink or do any of that. So I'm 100% sober. I can, or if you will, and convince people to not do stupid stuff. So my job is just to make sure I watched over Miles and Bryce, make sure they weren't doing anything stupid. I did my job right, which was always good. It sucked that Bryce didn't end up at Seton Hall initially, which it's kind of funny thinking that he ended up at Seton Hall anyway, at the end of the day. But it's crazy thing, like I still have the picture of me talking to Miles Powell in the hallway of Xavier Hall.
That's awesome.
I'll keep that as a memento, especially with, how heavy set Miles was at the time. And literally, I mean, just look at him now, he's chiseled at 6'2", 195, but, I don't think any of us could have envisioned what Miles became. And, we saw glimpses of it year one, year two, but I don't think anyone anticipated him becoming a superstar at Seton Hall, a guy who would be on Seton Hall's Mount Rushmore to a lot of people, and a guy who will probably see his number 13 race at the Raptors someday. I don't know when that'll be, but when that date comes, I will definitely make sure I'm in attendance for it. I mean, I don't think it's going to be a must-see event.
So, Tim, we have obviously heard you talk a lot about sports at Syracuse and New York Knicks and obviously Seton Hall, but where truly does your sports fandom come from? Because clearly, as we said, you are a super fan of Seton Hall, but how much of your fandom really derives from, your childhood and your upbringing?
So I think the big thing is I was raised in a household full of, sports fans. My dad is I wouldn't say a super fan, but he's a fanatic of Notre Dame football. And I was brought up with them. So I grew up watching, Brady Quinn and Jeff Samardzija, and, I have a lot of good memories from those days. But I think the most important memory sports wise for me when I was a kid, well, on top of, my dad also coaching me for basketball and a little bit of baseball on top of that too, came when I was 10 years old. It was my very first professional baseball game, and it was at the old Yankee Stadium. It was a rainy day. They're playing the Orioles, and right before first pitch, I think it was about like 15 minutes or so before, all of a sudden I hear the voice of, the late great Bob Shepard, who, you've heard stories about him, and he literally has the voice of God.
Yeah.
And, I just hear over the speakers, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm hearing this voice, and I'm just like, that's awesome. This is what I need to do for a living. Like right then and there, 10 years old, it was like getting struck by lightning almost. And having that epiphany, the light bulb going off, you name it. Like that was the moment for me. And considering, my personal story, and I don't really disclose it often, but when I was 3, I was diagnosed with being on the autism spectrum, specifically Asperger's syndrome. So I'm high functioning, but I do have some social deficiencies and, some struggles with, learning things, whether they be socially in the classroom, having a tough time picking up on some things. So, everything was, for me growing up, especially when I was younger and not as fully developed, it was an uphill climb, especially since my parents did a really good job of mainstreaming me instead of, holding me back with, more of the special ed kids. They wanted me to, be assimilated into, normalcy, if you will. And through their training of me, they did a really good job at that. And, they really encouraged me to do all these things. Like I started doing public address announcing when I was 13. When I was done playing Little League Baseball, my brother still had 1 or 2 years left. He decided not to play his last year. But when I was 13 after my last year, and he was technically his age 11 season, if you will, I was announcing for his games. And
that's really cool.
Yeah, so I realized, I'm like, oh my God, I think I'm pretty good at this. So I started doing it for the entire Little League. And I did that literally for the entire league from 8th grade until I graduated from high school. And then when I would come back my freshman and sophomore year, I would still do games when I would come back for the summer, when I had time between that and, working for the team then known as the Utica Brewers. And it's crazy to think, as a high school kid, I still hadn't quite graduated yet, but here I was at 18 years old. And I literally got a play-by-play broadcasting job for a summer collegiate baseball league that's produced a few major leaguers. And the really funny thing is, we had a future major leaguer on our team that summer.
Oh, really?
Cedric Mullins from the Baltimore Orioles.
That's awesome.
Who I actually, funny story, I got to see him the last major league game I went to 2 years ago, in Cleveland, Ohio, on Jim Thome Day. And I saw his first major league home run. Like, go figure.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I did that for 2 years, and to be retained after we had a name brand change to the Blue Sox, because that was the name of the New York Penn League team for a long, long time. They had to go through a lot of hoops and a rigorous process just to get the name back, because what happened with the old Blue Sox, they were bought by Cal Ripken and moved to Aberdeen, Maryland, became the Ironbirds. So they had to literally go through Cal Ripken to get the naming rights back in 2016, and they did. And they wanted to sound more professional, so they got a more veteran broadcaster, but they kept me on as a PA guy because they knew I had experience and because they knew I had musical intellect, and I knew what to do, and same with like sound effects and all that. Like I was in tune with that, so they kept me on for that, which I'm still always grateful for. I've been doing that now for 4 years, and I wouldn't have had that had I not had that moment back on April 22nd, 2006, where I literally heard Bob Shepard's voice and said, I know what I'm going to do for a living now.
So how has all of this transitioned now into you, running and working on the Igloo?
It's a really good question. Back in 2019, I was in a tough spot. I really didn't know what to do with, how am I going to get my name out there, because I'm only doing so much. And I had to think, I'm like, okay, my brother, who is only 20 months younger than me, he's a James Madison graduate, double majored in psych and Spanish, but he had a podcast dating back to when I was in college, called The Best Podcast. So he stole the title for that right away. Like I lost it there, but you know, it was all good. But you know, if he's able to have success with the podcast, and here I am, someone who should have a podcast of his own, considering what I majored in, journalism, and you know, someone who participated in student radio, student TV, like I should be doing that, right? So eventually I came to the conclusion, okay, I need to have a podcast. What's it going to be on? Okay. I don't want to have it just on Seton Hall basketball because there's already a Seton Hall basketball podcast. What there isn't a podcast on is Big East basketball. And I know a lot about the Big East and outside of Seton Hall because I literally studied the league like in depth when I was in college. And I knew about the Big East dating back to when I was a kid going to Syracuse games because Syracuse was a founding member of the Big East. You know, like I saw a lot of games, a lot of great games, you know, against like UConn and Georgetown. Matter of fact, I was at the last old Big East championship game back in 2013 when I was a junior in high school, in the last Syracuse-Georgetown meeting in the Garden, which was just absolutely electric both nights, and you know, something I'll never forget, one of my all-time favorite sports moments, an underrated one at that. So I think it was easy for me to narrow down that, okay, I'm going to do a Big East basketball podcast. And, you know, it took me a while to get my feet wet and finally, you know, start getting guests and whatnot. But, you know, like it's led to a lot of great things. You know, I got to be a part of Big East Media Day back in late October, which was an incredible experience. It was weird doing it all virtually, but, you know, that's kind of the norm of 2020. But you know, that's already opened so many doors with me because I've talked to a lot of great people, you know, getting a lot of great connections. And, you know, had I not taken that kind of chance on it, you know, who knows what I could have made of myself. And, you know, now that I have this podcast, you know, I have a voice for everybody to hear now and something to showcase for someone to, you know, maybe pick me up and, you know, take me on as a broadcaster or even as another PA voice and still be able to do this podcast on the side. So, you know, a lot of what I'm doing now, I'm really indebted to the Igloo, and coming up with that name, I think was pretty easy considering I jokingly call my house the Igloo. But I think it made sense because when I was coming up with like, you know, the title and I'm like, okay, I got to come up with a description for it. I'm like, you know, when I'm in the Igloo, you know, my takes are anything but cold, you know. Yeah, I like to keep everything fresh. Like, you know, oftentimes, you know, I would go hard in terms of some things. I had what I call an icebreaker. So if you watch SportsCenter with Scott Van Pelt, he does one big thing. So it's similar to that, but I tie it in, you know, something happening with Big East basketball or something related to it with something personal of mine. So I talked about how Ben Stanley, a guy from Xavier who transferred in from Hampton, he was denied a waiver despite being diagnosed by a psychologist at Xavier with 2 different learning disorders. And he went to Xavier from Hampton so that he could attend in-person classes so that he could learn better. So this is more of an academic move than a basketball move. And yet the NCAA denied him a waiver, which is absolutely bogus. So, you know, and I tie that in with like my own personal struggle with, you know, it's not quite a learning disorder, you know, to the same degree that Ben Stanley did, but, you know, being on the autism spectrum is a disability in its own. So, you know, being able to tie that in and then also tying in, you know, a number of different things. Like I talked about, if you guys remember when Cassius Winston's brother lost his life last year, I talked about my own personal struggles with mental health. And, you know, I was really candid about that. And, you know, like I try to use my whole thing, you know, using that platform as a way to provide hope for people, you know, and to give a voice to the voiceless. I have this voice. I want to use it to the best of my ability. And in a moment like that, you know, to be able to open up about something that's so tough to open up about, I knew it was something I had to do. And when I shared that, you know, I got so many great responses. And, you know, I think it resonated with a lot of people in the Seton Hall community. And what happened, I think I had it up, Monday of that week, and they ended up playing Michigan State on a Thursday night. And, you know, Cassius Winston ended up getting a really nice ovation because of it. And, you know, like, I think my icebreaker on that mental health, I think, resonated with people and, you know, led to that ovation. So again, you know, to have that voice and have it mean something, I think that's one of the most important things in life that we take for granted.
Yeah, for sure. And I really appreciate you sharing all those different things, because it's been really nice to see your professional development, but also your personal development. I mean, we've been friends throughout the years, and I really do commend you for taking that step to talk about those things. And I know that it could be tough. So I think you're doing a really great job with everything that you're doing, whether it is the Igloo, everything that you've done at Seton Hall. We all appreciate as a community of Seton Hall. Uh, Unfortunately, we're short on time. So I do have one more question for you.
Okay.
And that is, what is your prediction for the Pirates this season?
You know, it's tough to predict because you with scheduling and whatnot, like, you never really know what's going to happen. Like, they literally had an agreement to play St. Joe's this past Monday, but that got nixed, and they ended up scheduling that the Iona game kind of in impromptu fashion. So, you know, for the next few games, I think they will take care of business on the road against URI and Penn State. Oregon's going to be a toughie, but it's a winnable game. I think Oregon. I think LJ Figueroa, St. John's guy, strangely enough, I don't think he got a waiver to play this year.
Okay.
I think that opens up the door for them. I think they're thinking about last year in the Bahamas and losing to them. I think they're going to get revenge in that game. They'll take care of business against Wagner, and then Big East wise, I think they're the number 4 team in the conference. I think, you know, you have a lot of teams that have shown signs of weakness. Marquette didn't look all that great against Oklahoma State last night. Xavier's shown signs of weakness. You know, they almost lost quite a few games. Bradley, Toledo, they got taken to overtime against Eastern Kentucky. But I really believe this team is a top 4 team in the Big East. I will take that with me. I really believe that I don't want to use the word lock, but I'm very confident that this team is going to be a tournament team again. The big thing is, if they can stay healthy, that's going to be a big thing. You know, getting Bryce Aiken back is going to be important. But, you know, I have all the confidence in the world that Kevin Willard knows what he's doing. If there's anything I do question about him, it's that new beard he's got. But overall, though, I mean, Willard's a great guy. He's a great coach, and, you know, if it wasn't for him, Seton Hall basketball probably wouldn't be where it is right now without him. So overall, I think this program is in a position to make the tournament yet again. And I best believe that when Selection Sunday comes around, you hear Seton Hall's name called again. I guarantee you, Kevin's going to be drowning in some nachos. I've heard that's his favorite, and I'm hoping the queso. He'll be drowning in queso too. I don't know how much he dips. I hope he doesn't double dip. But Selection Sunday, I think when we get there in March, you're going to hear Seton Hall's name called yet again. It should have been called last year, of course. So this year would have been 7 in a row, but to make it 6 in a row, you know, if you would have told me that 6 years ago when I was a freshman, I would have thought you were nuts.
Yeah.
So again, Seton Hall in the tournament, book it.
Love it. No, as you said earlier, no cold takes here. But Tim, I want to thank you so much for coming on. You shared a lot of really great stories, and I was very happy to get you on finally, because you asked early on, and we finally got it. Thank you guys for watching. I really do appreciate it. Please like and subscribe if you can. For Chris Famularo and for Tim Best, have a nice day.